ferment there, the dust is in the air, and we don't know what's going to happen. Ataturk, the hero of Gallipoli, he held off the British and the Anzac troops at Gallipoli. You guys go down there?
No.
Okay.
Not enough time.
Right, there isn't. We did. But it takes a long while to get down there.
Yeah.
It's about a 5-hour bus trip from Istanbul. The hero of Gallipoli, Ataturk, following World War I, successfully drives the Greeks out of the Anatolian Peninsula and does indeed become the father of the modern Turkish state. And he sets about, after these treaties, make it clear that Turkey is to be an independent country of its own. A series of secularist, deeply secularist reforms, including the abolition of both the Sultanate and the Caliphate in 1924. The real Islamist types, including Osama bin Laden, never forgave Ataturk for this. And the Islamists, the Salafists' ambition is to reinstitute the Caliphate, roughly equivalent to the Pope in Roman Catholic Christianity, even more so, yeah.
But in what sense would they reinstate the Caliphate? Like, there's been so many different...
Great question.
There's been so much, like, attention about who was the Caliphate, even starting with who was the first one. Was it the guy whose name I can't remember right
Abu
now?
Bakr?
Yeah, or should it have been Ali, but he was...
There you go.
Okay.
This is the question to ask.
History nerd.
It's the nuts and bolts, the devil's in the details. It's one thing to say, oh, we want the Caliphate, the glorious days of Islam, bring the Caliph back. Who's going to be the Caliph? And how is he going to rule? In fact, the Caliphate was a very weak office, symbolic only, particularly after the Turks introduced the idea of Sultan. The title of Sultan comes into the late Abbasid dynasty, on the heels of the Seljuk Turks. Sultan in Arabic means the power. So who's the real power? It's not the Caliph. You march the Caliph out for moments of great religious significance, the fasting season, the pilgrimage, and so forth. But it's the Sultan, the power, who calls the shots. Ataturk would have none of this ceremonial nonsense, as he put it. And in fact, he said at one point, "I wish I could drive all religions into the sea." He's not a friend of organized religion. So is Turkey a torn country, as some say? Is this bipolar nature of Turkey tearing it apart? The Turks don't think so. Here are the Erdogans and the Guls at a family wedding of the Guls. The Erdogans were invited. But I want to quickly jump to some conclusions, some takeaways from all this, and have some time for some discussion. Let's see if I can slide it roughly. Not quite yet. Okay. The takeaway from all this, I think, runs as follows. The Ottoman Islamic Empire, having begun losing ground almost from its inception, to non-Muslim, that's Western Christian powers, enters this period of introspection and reform that we've talked about, that leads further and further away from Islam and more into secular modern Western ways. In internal politics, from Ataturk up to Erdogan, military training and operations, and in intellectual and scientific endeavors. It's a process that culminates with the founding of the modern republic, modern Turkish state under Ataturk. Ataturk sets the stage for the dominance of the military as watchdogs against encroaching Islamist tendencies, really up until the time of Erdogan in 2002. And from that point on, for the last 10 years, you've seen this, again, polarized psychological and political condition in Turkey, between the secularists on the one side and the religionists on the other. Now, no one thinks Turkey's Islamists are going to allow the extreme conservative Salafists, and there are some in Turkey, you may see some on the streets, to win any significant ground. Most religious Turks are much more interested in business, commerce, making money, not spending their days reading the Quran or bruising their foreheads in prayer. That's important. Erdogan, yes, does appeal to the lower classes, and there is a class dimension to all this. But the real Islamist power in Turkey is a more modern bent. It's couched in the middle and upper middle classes: bankers, lawyers, professionals, businessmen and businesswomen, and that has enabled the Islamists to advance relative to the army, to the secularists, in a much more significant way than had been true in earlier decades. Turkey is doing well economically. It's very hard to argue with Islamists when they're making a lot of money for the country. Almost that simple, not quite. I want to conclude with the following thoughts that from some of Turkey's contemporary writers that illustrate this bipolar pendulum in the Turkish psyche. Elif Shafak, we read this book in our group before we went over in 2008. Wonderful story, The Bastard, one, not wonderful in the sense of happy, but very powerful novel. The Bastard of Istanbul. She writes, we are stuck. We're stuck between the East and the West. And back to Digenes Akrates. Goes all the way back to pre-Islamic times. Think about geography. Between the past and the future. On the one hand, there are the secular modernists so proud of the regime they constructed you cannot breathe a critical word. They've got the army and half of the state on their side. On the other hand, there are the conventional traditionalists, so infatuated with the Ottoman past, you cannot breathe a critical word. They've got the general public and the remaining half of the state on their side. What is left for us? From the other side of the pendulum, you still see this bipolar nature. Yusuf Muftaoğlu, an advisor to the president, said in an interview, quote, "I'm one of those very few who believe that the real risk in Turkey is not Islamization, but anti-democratization. It would be misleading under the current circumstances to read the quarrel in Turkey as one purely between secularism and Islamism. It is in reality a battle between democracy and autocracy." Slightly different kind of bipolarism going on there, right? Orhan Pamuk, again one of my favorite authors, writes about the two souls of Turkey. As for Turkey, he writes, there have been so many authoritarian politicians over the years trying to impose one soul on Turkey, one way of life or mode of being. Some wanted to impose Western secularism by military means. Some wanted Turkey to be eternally traditional and Islamic. This approach destroyed democracy in Turkey. It was responsible for all the coups. To have two souls is a good thing. That is the way people really are. You have to understand that just like a person, a country can have two souls. These souls are continuously in dialogue with each other, sparring with each other, and changing each other. To have democracy is precisely to have this dialogue between these two souls. And I'm going to skip Erdogan. We talked quite a bit about him already. And finish with one of my favorite passages from perhaps my favorite Pamuk novel, My Name is Red. It's actually a detective story, a mystery, set in medieval, 16th century Ottoman times. And one of the characters in the novel is Satan. And Pamuk's Satan is one of the most ingenious constructs of Satan I think I've ever found in literature. I hope you'll see why. Let me read a little bit of a conversation that Satan is having with God about how bad things have gotten in the Topkapi Palace in late medieval Ottoman times. This is Satan speaking. I'm not the source of all the evil and sin in the world. Many people sin out of their own blind ambition, lust, lack of willpower, baseness, and most often out of their own idiocy, without any instigation, deception, or temptation on my part. Only God in His infinite wisdom, only you, God, will understand me. Was it not you who instilled men with pride by making the angels bow down before Him? This is a reference to a passage in the Quran, chapter 4, where God does order the angels to bow down to Adam after Adam's been created. And only one angel refuses to do so, and you know who it is. Satan. Was it not you who instilled men with pride by making the angels bow down before Him? Now they regard themselves as your angels were made to regard them. Men are worshipping themselves, placing themselves at the center of the world. I know it as well as I know my own name, that this narcissism will end in their forgetting you, God, entirely. And I'm the one who'll be blamed. Who else but Pamuk could make us feel sorry for the devil? So I'm going to end there and turn to discussion, whatever you want to do, whatever's next on the agenda.
Oh, well, questions. This man is, as you see, an incredible resource in my area is agricultural communication. So what sorts of things do you want to ask him?
Sure, thank you. Thirsty. So, okay, how can I help you sort all this out, or other things? You can't solve the problem between God and Satan.
No, Ted, I don't think even you can take that on.
A couple of us gone on a trip did research on the Turkish education system, and we looked at the Tree of Hussein. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that right, but you said that he,
Erdogan?
He was like interested in reform for the Turks.
Yeah.
I mean the Kurds. How much has he done with that as far as like reform and
Well,
Kurdish rights?
He's done some things. There are more Kurds working in the bureaucracy, state bureaucracy, since Erdogan took power. He's given in to demands, particularly in the East, to Kurdish language training and studies of Kurdish culture and history. So there's some real progress there, but and it may be too early to tell whether there's a turnaround going on. Certainly in the last year, with so much trouble south of the border in Syria, and the Kurds clearly trying to exploit that trouble in Syria and in Iraq, northern Iraq, and in eastern Turkey. And the Turkish government responding with an iron fist, particularly in the east. It's hard to know whether these reforms will hold on. I think they probably will. I think everybody in Turkey realizes that a lot of the problems, new problems with Kurdish resistance, are related to the unrest in Syria. And you mentioned something about education.
Yeah, we kind of just looked at like the minority groups in how they're treated with
Okay.
education, like how they're not allowed to speak Kurdish in any schools. And there's no mention of like Kurdish history or anything.
Yeah,
in the
that's
textbook.
starting to change.
It is.
Yeah, that's starting to change. What a more ominous trend in education generally that friends of mine who teach in Turkish schools bring up quite a bit is changes in the Turkish state education bureaucracy involving accreditation, particularly for private schools. I have a friend who was the headmaster of Üsküdar Academy, which is in Üsküdar on the Asian, it's a neighborhood on the Asian side.
Some of you will stay there.
Okay.
Your homestay.
Yeah. His name was Whit Shepard. He retired about a year ago. He was an NMH alumnus. An old student of Jim Block's. But I visited Whit at Üsküdar twice, once in 2004, once in 2008. And in 2008, I said, well, how are things going in the school and so forth, sort of raised his eyebrows. I said, well, we have some new problems to contend with. The Turkish education ministry has demanded that for private schools to be licensed or accredited, they have to have on their staff a member of the Turkish Ministry of Education as an assistant, at the rank of assistant principal. And I met this person. She was one woman who was very, very, very pleasant. But later on, we were away from her. Whit said that she's been a real big problem because she will not allow Pamuk, for example, on reading lists for English classes in Üsküdar Academy. The courses will not be accredited. If authors like Pamuk and Shafak were regarded as unfriendly to the Turkish government, they're on the reading list. The courses don't count. So that's a change that's taking place under Erdogan that has friends of mine who teach in Turkey alarmed.
I also had, along the same lines, when I was there was talk about how the journalists are being a lot more careful about what they're writing and where they're writing and the whole thing, because they just feel that it's subtle, but they feel it, and they can't tell where the boundaries are, and so they're choosing to not get themselves in trouble with some of the things they might want to say.
Yeah, unfortunately, it's not so subtle too. There are hundreds of them in jail.
They're in jail now.
Yeah, Trump's upstart.
A year ago. Yeah.
Yeah. There is a famous article in the Constitution. Kinzer mentions this. If you are convicted of insulting Turkishness, you can be arrested. First of all, what is Turkishness? Think about it. How do you define a good Turk and a bad Turk? That's a very elastic clause in the Constitution that gives prosecutors a lot of leeway in terms of who they throw into jail. So yeah, journalists, other high-profile people working in the government, of course, military officers who are in jail by the hundreds. Have been rounded up. Pamuk has managed to, I think, stay out of jail. I'm not sure whether he was in jail briefly, but he still has charges pending against him. So it's not an easy time to speak your mind.
No. Can you talk a little bit, one of the groups that we'll be visiting with is Morchata. It's a women's group. Can you talk a little bit, I realize I'm catching you off, but about women's rights and
Yeah.
how you see some of that?
No, actually, we had a lot more time last year to do that. And let me
Because I
talk a little bit about
they'll
that.
talk.
Human Rights Watch, for example, has Turkey on their radar. And
They were talking when we saw them. We've seen them gone to meet with them 2 years in a row, and they're on the schedule this year as well.
yeah,
And they had talked about some of the changes in the law about women's rights, but the difficulty in trying to actually have them upheld because in part of this shift of the government and some of all of the Islamic secular
yeah.
business.
Yeah, this is really interesting because there are a lot of cross currents going on here. On one hand, you've got women agitating for permission to wear the headscarf in universities, which the Constitution deliberately forbids. In the last year or two, though, what's happened is the authorities have backed away from enforcing that clause in the Constitution, and 2/3 of the women in Turkey wear the headscarf. But let me highlight some of the things that are coming out of Human Rights Watch, which is ground that I'm more familiar with than perhaps what you just mentioned, Linda. Erdogan came under fire from Human Rights Watch starting in 2011 for his decision to abolish the Ministry for Women and Family, replace it with the Ministry of Family and Social Policies. This was made, interestingly, before the June 12th elections, just 4 days before, June 8th, 2011, as part of a revised structure for the Council of Ministers. But it sent a signal that there would be a reduced emphasis on women's rights in this government. Human Rights Watch predicted that this would lead to an increase in violence against women. There already are very high levels of violence against women, particularly in the rural areas. Human Rights Watch urged Turkey to take urgent steps to combat endemic violence against women. A women's rights advocate and researcher at Human Rights Watch, a Turkish woman, Gari Dangulik, said the Turkish government's decision to scrap the Ministry for Women flies in the face of research showing major shortcomings on women's rights and horrendous violence against women. Women in Turkey need more determined action by the government, not less, to protect women's rights in practice. In a study by Turkey's Hacettepe University showed that, here by the way is the president's wife and Bettina Van Wolf side by side. I'm not sure why I put that picture in there, but
It was a good reason.
I'll think of it, maybe I'll remember. But the study at Hacettepe University showed that 42% of Turkish women experience physical or sexual violence inflicted by a relative at some point in their lives. And this kind of violence makes up a big part of Elif Shafak's novel, The Bastard of Istanbul, that I referred to earlier. The violence and sexual violation by close relatives. Big problem. In addition to the high rates of domestic violence in Turkey, other statistics speak to broader gender inequality in the country. In 2010, Turkey ranked 83 on the UN Development Programme's Gender Inequality Index. And that's down 6 places from 2008. Women hold only 9 seats in Parliament, and only 27 of the country's nearly 3,000 mayors are women. Women make up only 27% of the paid workforce. Only about 19% of women are engaged in income-generating work in Turkey. And the eastern part of the country, it's down to 10%, as you could surmise. Illiteracy figures released by the government show great disparities between men and women. 3.8 million of the 4.7 million in Turkey defined as illiterate are women. The Economist recently wrote that Turkey ranks with Russia as one of the worst countries in Europe. Note that the Economist lines up Turkey and Europe for the abuse of women, Turkey and Russia. By the government's admission, 5 women a day are killed by abusers. 42% of women over 15 have suffered physical or sexual violence. I mentioned that earlier. One horrific example, a 21-year-old Kurdish woman who was injected with poison, beaten, and raped by her husband and her in-laws, and locked in a barn without food or water. She decided to seek help from local prosecutors after her father-in-law burned her arm and told her, "I didn't just get you here for my son, but also for my own pleasure." So stories like that are fairly common. And the trends don't look good. Some of these trends have gotten on the radar of the EU, the European Union, negatively impacting Turkey's bid for the EU. 64% of adult women in the EU were employed in 2007. In Turkey, the percentage was 23.5%. So this gives you, I think, some idea of what the trends are. Now, I'm looking more quickly, trying to skim over some of this material I have here, but another thing that happens is that because of the conservative nature of rural Turkish life, women who may work while they're single will stop working once they become married, because then the focus is on family.
Yep.
Conservative Islamic culture in particular, the emphasis is on women as those who stay in the home, have children, raise the children, take care of the house, while the men take care of everything outside the house. This is a Muslim value that goes all the way back to the Quran, really, some would say, and it's still very much true in parts of the Arab world as well, large parts of the Arab world. So statistics for women in the workforce drop off quickly once women are married. That's one point. There's another interesting piece of this, and that's the class piece, the upper and lower classes. Sabrina Tavernesi, who used to be based in Istanbul, wrote for the New York Times, until just a couple of years ago, did a lot of work on this. Look up some of her articles from 2007, 2008, where you'll see that a lot of the emphasis here is on the role of class as a major force in the debate. Turkey's secular upper middle class increasingly feels threatened by the rising underclass, particularly the women who belong to the underclass. And this plays out in the pendulum swing between secularism and Islamist opinions. There's a class dimension to this. And it comes up most visibly in the debate over the headscarf, or the başörtüsü, as the Turks call it. This is the kind of scarf you're going to see most of the time. Again, not the full hijab, but You will also see some women who are fully veiled.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
So I know he touched on members of Erdogan's government sort of asking about the idea of introducing Sharia law.
Yeah.
Do you know where that stands? And it was a small percentage, but is that increasing now again? And
I don't see that going anywhere. I think even Erdogan realizes that that's far-fetched. I'm not sure anybody knows whether he or his wife, who again is very conservative, would want Turkey ruled under Sharia law, but that's a non-starter. It's of course a big part of the conversation in Egypt right now, where they're trying to put together a new constitution, and they're duking it out. They're Salafists who want Sharia law, the liberals who started the revolution but then began losing ground to the Muslims, with the Muslim Brotherhood in the middle. None of that's going to happen.
is there Sharia law? I know in general that concept of it is one of those things that's open to it. It's sort of open to interpretation with a very strict codes of it, and you can take it to an extreme extent. So it's how you're interpreting.
Exactly. That's always the right phrase to use. Interpretation. The written law is one thing, but how it's interpreted is another. By qadis. Again, it's a Turkish and Arabic word originally. Qadi means judge. Historically, the long span of Islamic history, Sharia law has been interpreted with great elasticity, particularly in those centuries when Islam was feeling more confident, more tolerant. In our own time, it's taken on a more strident, much stricter tone, so that the same legal tracts that are applied to theft, for example, may in one case lead to a slap on the wrist, and in another case lead to the hand being cut off.
Yes, because in my mind I sort of associated with Taliban and all that.
That's
where I guess it became more on our consciousness, but
That's it. It depends on the context. It depends where the law is being interpreted and by whom. Fatima Mernissi, a Moroccan feminist writer, whom I heard speak a few years back. And by the way, she can't get anything she writes published in Arabic. She writes in French. And that's how her writing comes to us. But she's fond of saying that if there were more women clerics in the Muslim world, you would see a very, very different picture of Islam than you see currently, the dominant one. And in fact, she has worked very hard to try to promote Islamic education for women. And you'll see some of this going on even in quite conservative circles. In Egypt, for example, it's not unusual to see women's groups headed by women wearing the hijab, teaching other women how to read and interpret the Quran and so forth. But clearly, the dominant culture is male. And that's true of Turkey as well.
When we, at the end of our time last year, when we were leaving the rural village, the mayor sponsored a big dinner and invited the members of the town who had hosted our students to come. It was way too flashy, over the top, not what we had asked for, very uncomfortable, all those cultural things. But what the students were most struck by was that the mayor and his table were fed first, of course, and the seating had been assigned by the mayor, the people that worked in the mayor's office's families, and then sort of moved around the room with the different connections And the women who were, it was clearly a class thing as well, the women who were better dressed at one end, and then it was almost a full hour after the 3 tables that were with him were fed, that other folks were fed.
Yeah.
And I thought my students were just going to climb out of their skins. They were just so outraged and offended by the whole thing, but of course you can't. There's nothing to be said about that. But at the end of the evening, he had a DJ that played for a little while, and the women were, clearly the women were allowed to dance, but the single women and the single men were allowed to dance in one section, and the married women could only dance in another section, and each one of them had asked their husband's permission to do so, and anybody that was probably over 25 never left their chair.
Yeah.
It was really, it was like the ending of seeing all the different cultural components come together, from everything you've talked about today, you know, the secular and the Islam, and the class, and the men and women, and the family structure, and the whole. It was really quite something. They talked about that for the entire rest of the
Sure.
semester.
Just one other way that class enters into this picture, specifically, the headscarf. You got to remember that only for about the last 10 years have a lot of women started wearing the headscarf. Before that time, the only women in Turkey who wore the headscarf were cleaning ladies. That kind of class, or women who packed your grocery bag at the market. And so today there's still a lot of people in Turkey who carry that old class stratification. Headscarf means lower class. Okay.
Was that true in that country as well, in the rural areas as well?
Well, no, not as much. No, yeah, exactly, because it's been there for so long. But but in the urban areas, you're seeing a lot more middle class and upper middle class women putting on the scarf.
So was the headscarf completely abolished under Ataturk? It was completely abolished in the whole
Well,
country?
no, completely abolished the fez.
Oh, okay.
The Turkish, the red hat that men, the scarf has been worn.
Oh, you didn't abolish that?
Yeah. But he did away with
The veil.
the veil.
Yeah.
And women weren't allowed to wear headscarves in schools.
Right.
Because there was the first year that we went over, there was a discussion in a university classroom about that, and women were, it was really interesting. Even in broken English, they were comparing the ability to make decisions about headscarves, and it got compared to as an important women's right and something that they should be allowed to have, and the fact that they weren't allowed to that just solidified some of the other bad issues about how women were treated in the country. It was quite interesting to hear young, they were in their 20s.
Sure.
Talking about that.
It may still be some time before the Constitution is changed to reflect what is starting to happen on the ground now. But for the time being, the ban on scarves in universities is not being forced. What happens when Erdogan becomes president, as he probably will, he wants to make the president the office of president a much more he wants the office to have a lot more meat than it does now. Abdullah shakes a lot of hands and holds receptions, but Erdogan really envisions the presidency somewhat along the same lines as what you see in France, a very active presence in government, and whether that will translate into greater rights for women is another story. I would not predict.
Interesting.
This was just on the thing of headdress. this is just small, but I was wondering when I read it, I was going to ask after. So what's the difference between the fez and then what you said Erdogan was wearing to look like Ataturk?
Oh,
They look the same to me.
well, the fez, I don't have a picture. The fez is that little round hat that was worn in Ottoman times.
Yeah, I can
It's very different from the Cossack style fur hat that Ataturk wore. That's not the fez.
Okay, because you showed a picture in the beginning, and I just sort of pictured.
Yeah, I wish I had a picture of a fez. The fez is made out of thin felt, and it fits the head.
More like a beanie. The way
Like a
it
beanie,
sits
yeah,
on your
yeah.
head,
It has sharper angles,
Yeah.
but they're almost always red.
Oh, yeah.
And Ataturk thought this was a mark of visible mark of Islam that
Yeah.
should be done away with. And it often had a tassel.
Yeah, my grandfather gave me dolls, and I remember it had that.
Yeah.
You'll see, well, it'll be interesting to see. I'm assuming this won't change that much this year, but every place you go, there's a picture of Ataturk in every business, in every shop you're in hallways, in public transport.
Every classroom.
And in the classrooms, it's not only his picture, but there's the poem that he wrote that's there, and it's almost always in Turkish and English translation, which I also thought was kind of interesting, in each of the classrooms. And I'm waiting to see how long it's going to be until some of these other more visible signs start to disappear. Because it seems like only a matter of time now.
Yeah.
Okay, folks, any other questions here for Ted while we have him? Because once he's gone, all we have left is this videotape or my telephone.
Well, I'm just down the road, so if I can help out in any other way, let me know.
Great.
Have a great time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Don't miss the Egyptian Spice Bazaar.
Of course.
Down near the Galata Bridge.
We'll be staying pretty close to that thing.
And what's interesting about that, spices make really great gifts for people. Because, first of all, they have one of those freeze-a-meal machines, so they seal everything up, so they'll get through customs. And they're lightweight, they fit in your bag, colorful, and all the rest. It's great. Have a great time.
Do you want to put in any requests for anything you want me to bring back?
Oh, just bring back your stories.